Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
The first statement goes as follows. The People Progressive Party has some profound concerns with regard to GCOM's announcement of the commencement of the claims and objections period on August 4, 2014. Prior to the closure of the sixth cycle of continuous registration, the party has formally registered its concerns to GCOM over the number of persons still to do transfers and sought an extension of the cycle to allow these persons with more time to do these transfers. However, surprisingly, GCOM denied this request. The PPP will be studying the constitutional ramifications of GCOM's announcements of a claims and objections period in the absence of any official indication from the President for national elections or the Minister of Local Government for local government elections. GCOM as provided for in the Constitution, manages elections. It does not have the mandate to summon an elections. In this regard, the issue of the qualifying date of October 31st, 2014, for any citizen who is 18 years of age begs the same question. More disturbing is that no one is clear, exactly a week before the commencement of the GCOM claims and objections period, whether this activity is an anticipation of a general and regional elections or local government elections. This issue is of critical importance, and GCOM's silence is deafening. The reasons for the PPP concerns are obvious. Local government elections will only involve residents of voting age in the 6 municipalities and 65 NDCs. In this situation, the concerns of the PPP nominated commissioners on GCOM and the PPP that 37,000 voters still have to be placed in constituencies demand to be publicly answered. If the claims and objections period is in anticipation of a general and regional elections, the requirement of residency is not as stringent and absolute as in the case of local government elections, where voters must be registered and placed in a specific constituency. Failing this, they will be disenfranchised, voters, and as potential candidates for an NDC or municipality if they so desire. Recent correspondence from GCOM, in fact, makes the issue more confusing as the correspondence speaks of both. Furthermore, the PPP is deeply concerned about information it has received with regards to the manner in which the staff for the claims and objections period in the regions has been hired with no public advertisement. This is a complete departure from the manner in which registration and election staff has been hired. The PPP calls on all Guyanese in this situation of uncertainties to take nothing for granted. The right to vote at free and fair elections was a long struggle and one that must be preserved at all costs. Notwithstanding our concerns, the PPP calls on all citizens of voting age to take full advantage of the period of claims and objections to take the preliminary voters list and ensure their particulars are correct and placed on the respective divisional lists. All persons who have migrated from one community to another who did not register previously must go in to the nearest GCOM office to make the necessary transfer. The first 21 days from August 4th, 2014 will be assigned for claims, while 8 days, including the set date, August 4th, are for objections. Objections can be made for persons who died. The claims period will allow persons to do the following business if needed. 1. Register as a new registrant if he or she would be 18 years old or older if his or her name is not on any of GCOM's preliminary voters list. 2. Make changes and corrections to the information which is on the list for him or her. 3. Move his or her particulars from one list to the list for the area where he or she is now living. 4. Apply for a new ID card to replace the one which was lost or misplaced. And finally, 5. Collect one's national ID card, if this has not yet been done, from the nearest GCOM office. The importance of this exercise cannot be overemphasized, since the revised voters list will be developed from the information gathered during this process. The PBP wishes to also advise the public that GCOM's preliminary voters list will be placed at strategic public locations within communities. Kindly check to see if these lists are posted and report to the PBP offices if these cannot be found or any other problems encountered during this period. The PBP, in closing, reiterates that all Guyanese voters must be vigilant and take this period of claims and objections seriously. Failure to not do so can result in persons being disenfranchised. The next statement is as follows. The People's Progressive Party still awaits some form of communication from the Speaker in response to its letters to him with regard to conflict of interest and pecuniary interests of 2 AFC members of Parliament, Mr. Scotty Hughes and Mr. K. Ramjatan, in relation to matters before the National Assembly. The PPP has indicated through its Chief Whip that it intends to bring a motion to take Mr. Scotty Hughes to the Committee of Privileges under Standing Order 32. Mrs. Hughes' company was hired to handle the public relations of Site Global, one of the companies working with the government on the Myla Falls Hydro project. Her husband, Mr. Nigel Hughes, was the company secretary of the Myla Falls Hydro Project, Inc. Neither of these pecuniary interests was voluntarily made public at the time of the debates on the first hydroelectric bill and the debt ceiling motion, which were defeated, nor on the second hydroelectric bill, which was passed, and the debt ceiling motions, which were amended by the AFC. The House and the public had a right to be informed by Mrs. Hughes of the pecuniary interests that she had in the matter, and she had a duty under the item, quote-unquote, personal explanations on the order paper at the time of her involvement and benefits from such an engagement. In the absence of this public disclosure, she should have rescued herself or recused herself, from participation in the vote on both sides. Furthermore, Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan, client Federloy, placed a bid for the tender of the specialty hospital in 2012. Mr. Ramjatan supported in the House the budgetary allocation for the said hospital. However, in 2013, when his client lost the bid, Mr. Ramjatan voted against the allocation for the said hospital. Mr. Ramjatan did not publicly declare his pecuniary interest at either time, and is therefore in violation of Standing Order 107, which states that, quote, no member shall appear before the Assembly or any committee thereof as counsel or solicitor for any party or in any capacity for which he or she is to receive a fee or reward, end of quote. At no time did Mr. Ramjatan recuse himself from voting on the budgetary allocations for the specialty hospital. The PVP has also taken notice of the owner of the Pegasus Hotel public declaration that he was a financier of the Alliance for Change at the 2011 general elections and regional elections. He publicly declared that he was opposed to the Marriott Hotel as it will compete with his hotel. It is passing coincidence that Mr. Ramjatan has publicly and consistently opposed and consistently tried to obstruct the Marriott Hotel project. Mr. Ramjatan at no time informed the House of his or his party's pecuniary interests. The BVP takes note of the treatment of such transgressions of members of Parliament in the Erskine May 23rd edition, page 132, footnote 4, which states, quote, "The Commons resolved in 1695 that, quote, the offer of money or other advantage to any member of Parliament for the promotion of any matter whatsoever, depending or to be transacted in Parliament, is a high crime and a misdemeanor," end of quote. The PPP has therefore indicated it will move motions in relation to these two AFC members of Parliament in accordance with Standing Order 22, and looks forward to the Speaker's support to allow these matters to be sent to the Committees of Privileges, and that Mr. Ramjatan and Mrs. Hughes are brought before the Privileged Committee. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open for questions on these two statements. Yeah, Adam.
Adam, sir, you preliminary voters list, although there has been no announcement or indication from the people who are responsible for announcing elections. It gives me the impression that GCOM's exercises an exercise in futility. Yet you're telling people to check to ensure that they adhere to claims and objection and all this. Why? Double standards?
No, there's no contradiction. No contradiction whatsoever. We have not received a clear indication from GCOM whether the lists that have been published and sent out to the chief scrutineers of the various parties, that is a list to be used for general and regional elections or local government elections. Claims and objections period usually linked to general and regional elections. So in the meantime, while we are making these representations, time is moving, and therefore, having regard to the fact that only yesterday GCOM published information pertaining to locations where we want to go to lodge claims and objections, we think it is necessary for persons to take advantage of the time while this matter is being trashed out to do what they have to do.
How long is the list valid for? For example, GCOM produces a list in October.
Mm-hmm.
How long would that list be valid for?
A list, I think, is valid for 6 months.
So after 6 months, then you go over the entire exercise again?
Well, that's what we're not clear about. That's not we're not clear about. Whether there will be whether there will be a 7th cycle of continuous registration or what, or another claims and objections period, because we don't know, what of the 2 tracks that GCOM is running on, and we need clarification on that.
Kiana Woodward, Country News. Good morning, Mr.
Morning.
3 questions. Could you respond firstly to allegations that the PPP tried to sabotage the PNCR Congress proceedings yesterday? And secondly, why was there such an interest from the PPP in the PNCR's Congress? And thirdly, why is government trying to take Mr. Ramjatan and Mrs. Hughes to the Privileges Committee now? Why wasn't this done when the matter was actually fresh and it came to the floor?
Well, I'll deal with the last one first because that's more within the ambit of my 2 press statements. The first 2 that you mentioned would come a little later on after the gentlemen and ladies here would have exhausted questions with respect to the 2 press statements that I raised, that I spoke to. It would not be correct to say that we are pursuing this matter now. I mentioned in my statement that, the Chief Whip, our Chief Whip, Madam Gail Teixeira, wrote a letter already to the Speaker on the matter. So it's not that we are only raising it now. We've raised it before. What we'll be doing now is making more formal representation on the matter.
Gordon Mosley, News Source.
And in any case, there's no statute of limitations with respect to pursuing matters of this type. As you would notice, the same question I would want to wager would be relevant to Mr. Granger raising all those questions about shootings that took place so many years ago. Why is he raising those things now?
Yeah, you go ahead.
But Mr. Rohi, sir, the issue with these two members of parliament, these were contracts and companies that were dealing with the government of Guyana. Surely the government of Guyana must have known who would have been the company secretary for a particular company it was dealing with, and who was the attorney for a particular company it was dealing with. So the government would have been in receipt of all this information. Why didn't the government raise the concerns? Or why did you wait until the budget issues to now raise it?
No, I don't think the government would be privy to that kind of information because remember, bids, are very confidential matters. When the advertisements are made for public tenders to be made by whoever wishes to participate, those are very private matters until the bids are opened and announcement made as to who made a bid or the other. So
But these are companies that were awarded contracts, were awarded.
no,
green lights,
I don't think that these two were for the hospitality. For the hospital?
The root one,
No, I don't think those two
the
companies.
Niagara Falls project.
Oh, you're talking about that one.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't think that the government would have known that. I really don't think the government
Who
would
the
have known
company
that.
secretary is for a multi-million-dollar contract that you're entering into.
But if you could recall, that information only came out when the disclosure hit the news. Then the whole country knew. Not true?
I'm trying to find out, sorry, the
Well,
government has.
if that's not true, well, I don't know at what point in time that information became
What I'm
public.
trying to get from you, sir, the government will have its investment office, Go Invest.
Uh-huh.
You'll have the Ministry of Finance, and these are people who have to be going over these documents
So
daily.
what's the point you're making?
Well, they don't know who the company secretary is for a company that's signing a
But
multi-billion
that's
dollar
not the point.
contract.
That's not the point that we're discussing here now.
They
What
have
is
to
the point?
declare it.
No, it's not. That's not the issue we're discussing here. The issue that we're discussing is the pecuniary interests of these individuals who should have made it known publicly at the time when these matters were being debated in the National Assembly. That's the issue.
But I'm asking why, if the government had knowledge of it, why didn't the government raise objections from the time you would have seen the names popping up in documents that the government was signing?
Well, I would assume that the government would prefer to wait until the matter went to Parliament. Because Parliament is where the matter was, properly ventilated.
And the government never raised it there either.
Okay. Any other question concerning these statements?
We could move on to other issues now.
Just in response to
PNC Congress.
Canada's question.
Yeah.
on PNC Congress.
Yeah, let me hear you now.
Okay.
You're missing black there. Oh, I see you have some black.
I don't-
You have some black there.
Yes.
The hair.
Okay, my first question had to do with if you could respond to allegations that the PPP tried to sabotage the proceedings of the Congress yesterday. And in an extension to that, could you explain why there was such an interest from the PPP in the Congress, in the PNC's Congress? I mean, if you take, for example, the paid ads in the newspapers.
I would dismiss that out of hand about the PDP sabotaging the PNC Congress. I mean, we have other interests to pursue, our party interests. So why would the PPP want to? The PPP must be a very influential and powerful party to be able to sabotage a PNC Congress. So, I mean, I think that's just politics.
Incidentally, Mr. Granger, on that same question, Mr. Granger said that the PPP has its ways and means of influencing the PNC supporters.
Oh, that's good news. That's wonderful news.
Yeah, I think he said that.
So he said, when we asked him what evidence he had to say, well, there was sabotage, he says that the
Ways
PNC
and means.
ways and means of
They have ways
influencing,
and means.
of influencing supporters, that's what he said.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to hear that, but I've also heard him say that we would infiltrate provocateurs or people like this, to create these difficulties for the party, for his party. But that's a ruse that has always been made. Whenever they have demonstrations or protests, they would always claim that the PPP infiltrated people to, engage in riots and disturbances and looting and so forth. So that's nothing new. They always say that.
You say it's just politics, Guyana style.
The first one,
The first one.
yes.
So your concerns
And the
about-
second one, sorry?
The second one had to do with the interest. Why such an interest from the PPP starting the Congress with the paid ads?
Well,
and all
the PNC has been for years the major rival of the PPP politically. So obviously we will have an interest in what they're doing. In the same way they will have an interest in what we are doing. I would assume that if our Congress is being held, the same kind of interest would be
paid ads and all?
paid what? You saw something paid by the PPP?
Yes.
PPP, mark paid by the PPP? Oh, come on. Come on. You bring the evidence to show me that these were ads that were paid by the PPP. I don't know anything about that. That was said, but that's just a view.
Did the PPP place any ads in the
No,
newspapers?
sir, no, not my party. We
Did the
didn't pay
government
any.
of Guyana?
I can't answer for that one. I can't answer for that one, but I know the PPP didn't place any ads. We issued a statement, which you probably saw. We issued a statement.
Sir, I want to go back to the statement, and I got an input in GCOM. The party has 3 representatives on GCOM, 3 commissioners. And GCOM only takes decision when there is either unanimity or
There's a division.
division or something.
Then the chairman uses cast and vote.
Good. Some of these decisions that GCOM has taken, were your commissioners involved? Were they outvoted? For example, let's go ahead with claims and objection, let's do this, let's do that, let's produce a PVL. Were your commissioners involved in making these decisions, or were they outvoted?
I don't know. I haven't seen the minutes of the meetings where those matters were discussed. But whatever the case might be, I still feel that the party has a responsibility to its constituents to express its view. Because as I said over and over again, it's a party that contests elections. And win or lose, we have a major stake in the whole process. And we need to make our voices, our positions, our opinions known from now.
As General Secretary, sir, when these things were happening, did you try to call your commissioners in for a briefing or a meeting?
No, well, take for example the publication of the list. It's only when the lists are published then we would know. Then we would be able to figure out, so to speak, whether these lists are for general elections or whether they are for local government elections. Because they're different type of lists, or the list would be probably configured differently or used differently on the ground. So that's why we're asking those questions.
No, but why ask, you didn't try to call your commissioners to find out exactly what's going on? Huh?
They have nominees, not commissioners.
Oh yeah, your nominees, your people on the commission, you didn't call them in to get a briefing on what's going on here, what is happening at GCOM?
Yeah, well, they would come and we would invite them in and they would give explanations and so on, but it doesn't mean to say that, if they have taken a decision at the level of the commission, that the party having, examined the question from a political perspective. Because remember, they from time to time they will take guidance from us, but remember they are not wholly committed to taking guidance from us on every single matter. So from time to time they will take guidance from us on issues, and from time to time they would sit among themselves as commissioners and deliberate and take positions on matters that fall to them. It would be in cases like that that the party would pronounce one way or the other.
Mr. Rohi, sir, we're hearing a lot of talk about snap elections, and the PPP has indicated that it will be ready if these elections are called, if there's a no confidence motion and stuff like that. Sir, but has the party started looking at presidential candidate, prime ministerial candidate, or you go with the same two?
No, well, that matter came up sometime before, you know. And I said that we have a process that we will usually go through, long established, that we will go through in order to identify, you know, the best candidate each time around. So we're still some distance away from that.
If elections were to be called next year, early elections, do you think the current president is the best candidate to lead the party into those elections? Taking into account the fact that you lost votes the last time you did the election.
Put it this way. As I said, there's a process. There's a process. So we have to give the party the opportunity to continue or to pursue that long-established process. It's not a question of my opinion. It's a question of the collective's opinion on what will come out as a result of the process.
But would you be prepared to accept any of the two top positions should you be called upon by your party?
As I said before, I'm not prepared to comment on that at this point in time. You know, let the process roll. Yeah.
Any other
I
questions?
saw where you were coming from. I know.
If not, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Adam, you look tired. What happened?
Incidentally, I saw editorial in today's Kaichou News. I saw editorial in today's Kaichou News. Where it speaks about insulting the intelligence of the Guyanese people. That is to say about Mr. Granger sitting in the company of an
We
alleged
just want to look at it.
criminal. And more or less saying that how could I draw conclusions about the PNC's association with criminality simply because Mr. Granger was seen sitting at some event where this individual was present. Now, you know, in a democracy, people are free to express different views on matters. And I don't think it's the wisest thing to pin one down to one opinion or the other. Or else we would probably end up with what was done in those days as the Gulag Archipelago. That is, if you don't agree with one, then you... So we have our views. And, you know, I could bowl a similar ball. And I think that might be the ball that would be similar to the one that the warriors, Amazon warriors, bowled in Barbados. But the point I want to make is this, that, you know, I think we got to sometimes put these matters in perspective. Because remember after the Linden disturbances, and Mr. Granger and his team ran to the Parliament to pass a no confidence motion in me. And they were warned that, you know, a commission of inquiry had been established and they should await the outcome of the commission inquiry before they pass judgment on the minister without having any evidence at all. They didn't pay attention to that. They passed judgment on me. They went ahead and did what they had to do. And that matter is still in effect. So, I mean, you know, it's a similar situation. They didn't wait to hear anything about anybody. They just passed judgment and they did what they have to do. So I think in a similar vein, on balance, the point that they're making about me insulting the intelligence of Guyanese, I think that was a bigger insult to the Guyanese because the matter was taken to the Parliament. And the Parliament was asked to pass a motion without a shred of evidence that I was involved in that matter. And then the Commission of Inquiry met, and exonerated me from it. So who is insulting whose intelligence? Where was the biggest insult passed?
You know, what you say makes sense. And if you care to, you respond, or you treat Guyana as a 7-day wonder. Within 7 days, nobody gonna remember that editorial. So that good.
I'm not so sure about that. Historians would. I'm not saying you. I will use it a little differently. That is where I think we will be underestimating the intelligence of these journalists who sit here, because probably years from now, they will be editors of newspapers or something or the other, and they will recall when they're writing something in Reflections what was printed in editorial.